What the? How does he keep breaking in? The enforcers got this.
How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric and welcome to Out of the Groove. I cleaned up that cardboard mess during the intro, but we've got a lot to talk about. NASCAR is reviewing Kyle Busch's spin from Friday night's Truck Series race. We'll talk about that. Also, we've got some next-gen car financial details to talk about as well. We'll get to that all in just a moment, but of course, if you couldn't tell by that intro, this episode is sponsored by my friends at Swan Security. Remember to use code GROOVE at checkout for 15% off any Swan product. Their link is down in the description. Swan is a great supporter of all things Out of the Groove. This show, the podcast network, the weekly viewers guide, really, truly appreciate their support. So go show some love to my friends at Swan. Also, quick announcement regarding the Out of the Groove podcast network. We've recently added a brand new show to the lineup. Welcome Noah C. Cornelius, host of Noah Talks NASCAR. We made the announcement yesterday. I was on his most recent episode that he posted yesterday. We had a great conversation about where NASCAR is, where it's heading. He's a good dude. He's young. He's super enthusiastic about the sport. His energy is contagious. So go check out Noah Talks NASCAR, now a part of the Out of the Groove podcast network, joining A Lifetime in NASCAR and the NASCAR Weekly podcast. You can listen to the latest episodes from all of those shows and a whole lot more by clicking that link down in the description as well. All right, I've pointed you all to the description enough. Let's talk about some NASCAR news and rumors. Firstly, I just want to get this out of the way. Marcus Lemonis is at it again. You know, the CEO, owner, founder, whatever he is of Camping World, that guy, he's at it again. He's up to his old tricks again. He put out a tweet yesterday, once again asking if there are any unsponsored Truck Series teams for their upcoming race at Atlanta in a couple weeks. They do have this weekend off. Similar to what he did before the Truck Series race, of course, where we had 10 Camping World sponsored trucks Friday night. Now, Marcus Lemonis, he learned from that. He's getting out ahead of this one because last week he made that tweet like 2 or 3 days before the race. Everyone was scrambling last minute to get their wraps finished, and on the trucks it was pandemonium from what I could tell. He's getting ahead of this one now, giving them plenty of extra time to finalize things and really develop some cool stuff. But once again, I can't really say anything new about this. It's great that he's supporting the Truck Series with so much gusto, so much enthusiasm. We'll see if we can get more than 10 Camping World trucks on track at Atlanta. I don't know, what will be the record this year? Which race this year do you think will host the most Camping World sponsored trucks? I mean, 10 is the number to beat, and I feel like that's gonna be a steep hill to climb. But anyway, just wanted to give that a shout out. It's worth discussing. We're gonna talk Kyle Busch and his controversial spin from Friday night's Truck Series race in just a few moments. We'll hear what NASCAR had to say about it because it sounds like they're not too happy and are considering adding something new to the rule book, but we'll talk about that in a moment. I want to start with some reports I saw from Bozzy on Twitter. Bozy, I have no idea. At least I didn't call him Bozo like Reddit. Anyway, he's an IMSA mechanic, motorsports rider. You may have seen, you probably have seen his in-depth Twitter threads at some point or another on some sort of topic. Well, yesterday he was discussing some of the things he has found out about NASCAR's all-new next-gen car set to debut in February of 2021. Remember, a little over a year ago now, Kyle Busch, I know we're talking about Kyle Busch a lot today, made headlines when he said that, from what he had heard, the next gen car was going to cost maybe 4 times more per car than the current Gen 6. All this talk about cutting costs with the next gen car, Kyle Busch was saying a year ago they would cost $800,000 approximately, as opposed to the about $200,000 teams spend per Gen 6 car now. That's what Kyle Busch said, and since then, there's been some evidence to the contrary, but we haven't seen any real specific numbers or data. Well, Bozy yesterday put out a Twitter thread that was an extension of past tweets on the subject he has made. His first tweet he posted yesterday, my understanding is that NASCAR set the projected parts cost for the next gen car at $230,000, and the latest estimates I have seen still have it below that amount, as they are roughly in the $170,000 to $190,000 range. So they still have some room to make additional adjustments and meet goals. Now he notes this, but those costs do not currently include the costs of engines, of course, labor, R&D costs, all that is extra. We're just focusing on the materials, the parts to put these cars together. Because remember, with the next gen car, Stewart-Haas, Hendrick, Penske, Gibbs, all the big teams, they're not going to be building and putting these cars together themselves anymore. No, largely they will be buying these cars pre-built by NASCAR's assigned manufacturers. And actually, in this thread, he lists some of the manufacturers of certain parts of the next gen car that he believes to be confirmed at this point. And here are some of those. Dallara is now listed as the ductwork supplier for next gen instead of KCMG, based on what I understand. He lists Technique, X-Track, Öhlins, Hyperco, AP Racing, BBS, and Dallara as some of the companies involved in manufacturing, as you can see, key components of the next gen car. He also points out that it appears Roush is going to be building parts of the next gen car as well. He also points to a LinkedIn post from Roush recently. He says Roush is likely to supply multiple parts that include parts like the suspension uprights and the shifter. So I guess I misspoke. Roush is still building parts of their cars, I guess, of all the cars. So in other words, all of those suppliers are working together to build certain parts and assemble the next gen car that will then be purchased by the teams like Hendrick, Ganassi, Joe Gibbs. They will buy the next gen cars and bring them to their shop, largely put together. The teams will of course load up their own engines and things, but a lot of the personalization that we've come to know in NASCAR will not be available to the teams, which is one of the many cost-saving measures. Now teams aren't going to be able to try and outspend each other on research and development and building entire cars from scratch. It's really handcuffing the teams and forcing them to not spend money. That's how they're basically cutting costs in this case. Now, a lot of those big teams will probably spend a lot of that money in other departments, but this is a big one. This is a big one that NASCAR is kind of taking out of the team's hands, more or less. It's the best way, the easiest way I can explain it. Now again, per Bosie's estimate, the next gen car, the parts at least, are expected to cost a little over $200,000 per race car. Now, according to Kyle Busch and according to other reports, a current NASCAR Cup Series car, a Gen 6 car, costs about $200,000. So of course, when you add in the other costs that we don't see in that $230,000 number, the next gen car per car is likely going to be a little bit more expensive than a Gen 6 race car per car. It doesn't look like it's going to be $800,000 versus $200,000 like Kyle Busch was suggesting many months back, but it does look like the next gen will be a little bit more expensive. However, the way this is still expected to cut some costs for teams, one, through all the research and development stuff that NASCAR is taking out of their hands, like I just mentioned, but two, the next gen cars are built to be more durable and more versatile. The idea is that race teams will not need to buy up as many next gen cars, because one next gen car, by just switching out a few components, could race at, Darlington one week and perhaps Sonoma, a completely different track, the next. One thing Kyle Busch said over a year ago that does appear to be correct is, a year ago he said that, from what he'd heard, the next gen car was going to be heavier than the Gen 6, if that's even possible. That does appear to be true, and it has to do with this durability factor I'm talking about, to make the cars more durable so that one next gen car can run a variety of races throughout the season. The parts got to be heavier. They have to be, there has to be added reinforcement there. That's just going to naturally add a little bit of weight. I read one of Bosie's articles from a few months back, and in it there's a quote from Alan Gustafson, of course, Chase Elliott's crew chief, and he says, "The car is more suited for road course racing and more suited for street course racing." That all echoes things that Martin Truex Jr. and Kurt Busch said during their Charlotte Roval test at the end of 2020, when they had really nothing but positive things to say about how the next gen car drove on that road course. So it really is interesting, as we're now less than a year away from the official premiere of the next gen car. As the model becomes a little more clear, we may never find out exactly how much one next gen car costs. It's probably going to cost a little bit more per unit than the Gen 6 cars currently do, but if the next gen car truly turns into a sort of one-size-fits-all car, the type of car that you can run at Martinsville one week and then the next month you can run it at Daytona with just a few things being swapped out here and there, that would be fantastic, and that would certainly cut costs, I believe, in the long run for race teams. Because right now, the top teams, not even the top, but just the good teams in the NASCAR Cup Series have dedicated road course cars, dedicated short track cars, intermediate, super speed. They have a whole fleet for each type of track. If the next gen car can, again, allow these teams to operate with fewer total cars in their fleet, yes, the cars by themselves, one at a time, are more expensive, but if you're buying up way less of them, you're saving money ultimately. And of course, these next gen cars, if they truly are as durable as they claim to be, You know, a car could be competitive for a couple different years instead of cars being retired every single year, or at least being passed down to the smaller teams every single year. You know, you might keep, if you're Hendrick Motorsports, you might keep this race car for several years because it's just that good and it's that durable. So you're not buying up as many new cars or building as many new cars every single year. Anyway, this is getting way too complicated, but I do appreciate that thread from Bozy providing at least some insight into how the business, how the finances behind the next gen car may end up playing out, as we are technically done with development of the next gen car, according to NASCAR from a few weeks back. Now it's just getting the cars in the hands of the teams and tire tests and things like that, and hopefully we'll all be set to go come Daytona next February. 11 months. We can do it. We're almost there. Anyway, I hope you guys found that interesting. Now let's talk about some drama. And we'll talk about Kyle Busch some more. He's at the center of it. What a surprise. So, if you missed it, Friday night, Kyle Busch raced in the Camping World Truck Series race at Las Vegas. He was a contender all night long, but late in the race, he cut a tire, had a flat, got down on the apron, was going pretty slow trying to limp it to pit road under green flag conditions, when all of a sudden the 51 truck seemed to loop around all by itself, a lazy little spin that brought out the caution and saved Kyle Busch from going likely multiple laps down, kept him in the race. He caught back up to the field, repaired the tire. Kyle Busch drove back to finish second in that race, and that was really only made possible because NASCAR chose to throw the yellow flag when he spun out on the apron. Of course, fans immediately, in fact, the broadcast booth of Austin Dillon and Michael Waltrip immediately identified this as an intentional spin. They immediately looked at it and said, that is suspicious. It's pretty clear that Kyle Busch, a world-class driver, should have been able to limp that car home, even with a flat tire. He was going like 50 miles an hour. Like, it was pretty clear, even to the average fan watching at home, that he spun out on purpose. But NASCAR has a precedent that they have set in recent years. They don't penalize drivers for spinning out on purpose unless they commit the unforgivable sin of admitting to it on camera. So NASCAR did not penalize Kyle Busch in the moment or after the fact because Kyle Busch, he's a smart man. He never admitted to spinning out on purpose. Bob Pockris asked him straight up during his post-race media availability about that spin, and Kyle Busch declined to talk about it.
So can you kind of take me through your spin? Thanks.
Nope.
I'm sorry?
Nope.
You're not going to explain what happened?
Nope.
So with this latest example, and I don't mean to pick on Kyle Busch, many drivers, top drivers in NASCAR probably have all spun out on purpose like that to try and get a yellow to avoid going multiple laps down before. It's not a new thing, so I don't mean to fully pick on Kyle Busch, but I will say Kyle Busch's example Friday night was one of the more egregious examples, especially considering the very next day, Saturday's Xfinity Series race, Austin Cindric had a flat tire going like 160, and he saved the car without seemingly too much issue. And he ended up going a lap down because he pit under green. He did get bailed out by a caution for an unrelated. Some other guys spun out at just the right time, but Austin Cindric did not spin out on purpose. He limped that car home with a flat tire to pit road and was willing to take the penalty. Kyle Busch spun out on purpose, and that allowed him to come back and finish second. Anyway, I don't mean to pick on Kyle Busch, but this weekend's example was especially egregious. It's got a lot of fans, and it's got NASCAR talking about whether or not they need to change their policy around drivers intentionally spinning out with flat tires. So NASCAR Vice President of Competition Scott Miller spoke to SiriusXM NASCAR Radio yesterday, and here's some of what he had to say about the Kyle Busch intentional spin. Again, NASCAR didn't penalize him. They're not going to get in the business of that, at least not yet, but here's what he had to say. It's hard for us to know what is going on inside the car, but we have our competition meeting, and I'm sure there will be discussions on the particular one that prompted that question, and we'll kind of review it. He's talking about the Kyle Busch spin at the end there. Anyway, but what we can't let happen, and what we will probably be more inclined to do moving forward, is having a flat tire and trying to get back to pit road is not an excuse to spin out. So if we have to crack down a little bit harder on those things happening so that doesn't become a trend, we will certainly react to that. NASCAR Vice President of Competition Scott Miller there saying that NASCAR may be willing to change their current policy regarding these intentional spins. A reminder, NASCAR rarely penalizes drivers for intentionally spinning out. You literally have to admit it on camera, like Bubba Wallace did in 2019. Days after the actual race where he spun out, he admitted to a reporter in the garage area on video that he spun out on purpose. NASCAR retroactively fined him $50,000 for him spinning out at Texas. So that's the most recent example of a driver being penalized for intentionally spinning out. I always talk about Spingate. Everyone remembers Spingate, and it's called Spingate in 2013 when Clint Boyer and Michael Waltrip Racing tried to game the playoff system. Despite it being called Spingate, the huge penalties that NASCAR handed Michael Waltrip Racing judgment did not technically have anything to do with Clint Bowyer's spin. Now remember, they penalized the team for actions Brian Vickers' team did, and comments they heard over the radio and things like that. The Clint Bowyer spin may have, kind of been a reason, but it was not listed in the actual penalty report as to why NASCAR handed Michael Waltrip Racing huge penalties. So that's my point. It takes a lot. Right now, it takes a lot for NASCAR to fine or penalize a driver for intentionally spinning out. They just don't want to do it. They want to stay as hands-off as possible. You have to actually admit to doing it for NASCAR to step in. But that's why the question is being raised now. Should that change? Should NASCAR start stepping in if they believe, per their judgment, that a driver intentionally spun out? Should there be a penalty? Should that become the new way going forward? Scott Miller seems to be opening that door up as a potential possibility, but it doesn't sound like anything is imminent. I don't think they're going to do it now. I don't think it's going to be something new that they enacted this week. I think it's going to take another high-profile example, at least one more, for them to, like as he says, react to it. They're not going to be proactive here. They're going to be reactive, which I'm not sure if that's the best course of action. But the question turns to you and me now. Do you think NASCAR should try to get in the business of policing whether or not a driver spun out on purpose or not? It's a gray area, and I know how we feel about NASCAR and race control having gray areas to operate within. It feels like more often than not they make poor decisions that frustrate the fans, frustrate drivers. So I'm torn on this. In the moment, I think it's difficult in the moment to make a penalty. Like say in the moment, Friday night, NASCAR sees Kyle Busch spin and they hold him a lap because oh, we saw right then and there, you spun out on purpose. I mean, yes, that was a really obvious example. That might have been an easy decision to make, but there are past examples that would have probably been a harder decision to make. I think if NASCAR wants to look back, a few days later, Tuesday, Wednesday, when they release their penalty reports, if they want to take a few days to review incidents, review a specific incident, I mean, they have a lot of data at their disposal. They have tons of film. I believe they have SMT data. They can probably go back and look at throttle, braking, and steering even for every car during the race. I think they have that on backlog. They can go watch it on demand. I think, maybe I'm wrong about that, but I know they have a lot of information at their disposal where I feel like they could conclusively determine if a driver spun out on purpose or not. So later in the week, if NASCAR wants to threaten fines for drivers who spin out on purpose, maybe even a points deduction, you lose 10 points if you are deemed to have spun out on purpose during the race, I think that's possible. Because it's not a decision that NASCAR race control is pressured to make in the moment during the race itself. That's something where all parties can get involved. They have multiple days to converse, to discuss it. That's something I think that could be possible going forward. I'd like to see the drivers just kind of police themselves. I don't want NASCAR to get too hands-on and end up micromanaging things too heavily. I don't really like that, but I also don't like when drivers are intentionally spinning out like that. That changes the course of a race, and it's just kind of a cheap way. It's the same way in basketball. Oh, this is going to get off in the weeds. It's you're up by 3 and the other team has the ball with 3 seconds to go and you foul them before they take a shot, so they only get 2 free throws. So now you fouled them, you committed the violation, but by doing so, that helped your team win because now they can only shoot 2 free throws and it's very unlikely they're going to get the 3 points needed to tie the game or to beat you. That was a terrible, wow. I'm so sorry, fans people who are not stick and ball sport fans. That was a difficult analogy. Anyway, I'm not sure how I feel about it. I'm not a fan of NASCAR trying to police it in the moment. I think that's fraught with peril, but if NASCAR wants to take a look and days later, the week after, if they want to hand drivers fines for intentionally spinning out, I think that could be worth exploring. Maybe a trial run perhaps, because while Kyle Busch did not explicitly admit to spinning out on purpose, we all know he did. And that's what allowed him to come back and finish second in that race. Anyway, let me know what you guys think of this idea. Do you think NASCAR should penalize drivers for intentionally spinning out per their judgment? Let me know down in the comments below. Thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe if you're new to the channel. We talk NASCAR day in, day out. As always, a huge thank you to my amazing Patreon supporters as well. Could not do this show without your tremendous support. Go listen to Noah Talks NASCAR. Listen to that most recent episode with yours truly featured on it as a guest. A lot of fun talking to that guy. Like I said, his enthusiasm, his energy, it's contagious. I guarantee you that. I really appreciate the support, y'all. Go check that out. I will see you in the next video.